They're actually going to be ending native forest logging by the end of this year. Yeah. So congratulations to everybody, many people in this room who have worked for many years to achieve this outcome. So fantastic, well done. It's not over yet. Apparently there are more issues that need to be resolved around forests in Victoria's native forests. So yeah, it's not over yet, but it's a fantastic win. Okay, so tonight we're going to be focusing on home electrification. As our grid decarbonizes, electrification of our home appliances and transport offers a clear path to zero emissions. The Victorian government is planning to have 60% of Victoria's electricity generated by renewables by 2030 and 95% by 2035. So 95% of our grid is going to be from renewables by 2035. It's pretty fantastic effort, I think. So as residents, we can supercharge this effort by ensuring that we are not stuck on the polluting gas network, but are instead heating our homes and water, cooking and driving on renewable electric power, including what we generate on our own roofs. So tonight, we're going to hear first from engineer and home energy expert Tim Forcey. Dr. Genevieve Cowie will speak to us about the health impacts of gas in the home. We'll save audience questions until after both of our speakers have spoken. After audience questions, we'll hear from Mark Cubitt, the convener of the Electrify Boroondara Alliance, and then we'll have some lighter footprints business. So to begin, I'll introduce Tim. Tim Forcey migrated to Australia to work as a chemical engineer in the fossil oil and gas industry with companies such as BHP and ExxonMobil. He also worked for the Australian Energy Market Operator. Tim now helps homes get off gas and to heat and cook with cheaper and cleaner electric options. He's provided energy advice to over 1,000 homes and is the founder of the popular Facebook group My Efficient Electric Home, which has grown to over 86,000 members, and Tim will probably tell me it's now 87,000 members because it is growing every day, and it's fun to watch the questions that people put in there that they're having trouble with in their home, and they get great answers. So if you're stuck on something, try that Facebook group. Yeah, so they help each other every day with free advice on ways to improve their homes. So please welcome Tim Forcey.
This is amazing. This is blowing my mind, what I see here tonight with everybody here and what I see printed up and what I know that this group has done over the years. So it's almost a little bit intimidating. I'm kind of nervous. I mean, I do a lot of work with community groups, but might be a bit smaller and a bit less potent and powerful than what I see here with the Lighter Footprints group. So good on you. I have presented to the group in years gone by, so let's do it again. But first off, I'd like to say, who here, get ready to put up your hand, who here would like to get a gas bill for the rest of your life, okay? Nobody? Shucks. Look, I did a silly thing today. I live in Sandringham, but I decided I'd book 2 clients today up this way. So I just finished with a house in Kew, and earlier today I was with a house in Surrey Hills. I go into homes, I spend 3 hours with the folks there. We look at everything, we talk about everything. I'll crawl up in the roof space. I'm still picking a few spider webs out of my head here tonight. But I've already talked about this for 6 hours today, so I guess we can keep going. Yeah, let's get our homes off gas and onto the heat pumps because you can save money. I mean, you can go on about the environmental reasons to do so, but the work we did back at Melbourne Uni 8 years ago in 2015, back then we found out it was cheaper to heat the place with the reverse cycle air conditioners than gas heating. Not quite sure how we're heating the place tonight. They don't even look like they're on, but this isn't news. It's been out there for a while, but it's great to see the movement is really getting going now. Yeah, I mentioned the Facebook group, so if a lot of you are probably already in there already, My Efficient Electric Home. If you're not on Facebook, great, stay that way. But if you have been sucked into Facebook, you might as well get the most out of it by joining a good group like this. My Efficient Electric Home, yeah, it's 87,000 members now. It's 1,000, it's going up about 1,000 a week. So a lot of people coming in from all over the country wanting to improve their homes. And it's funny, when we get a cold front hit, People ring my phone and people join the Facebook group, so I expect we'll see another big influx about tomorrow when we see the heat coming in. But one of the reasons I started this group 8 years ago was after we'd done that research at Melbourne Uni, we said, look, it's a lot cheaper to heat your house with an air conditioner. You can save, $500, $1,000 a winter by heating with an air conditioner. And then I did it in my own house and proved all that. But we didn't have, like thousands of case studies. Well, now we have thousands and tens of thousands of case studies of people doing this sort of thing around the country. Now we have people like Saul Griffith who've arrived, and so, really amping up the messaging, which is great. But here's just some case studies here I've listed on the bottom there, some of the things from the Facebook group. We used our reverse cycle this winter in Canberra and worked great, on track to save $1,100. That was from Jackie, and that was pretty much exactly the same sort of cost savings that we'd worked out at Melbourne Uni back in 2015. Tonight I'll talk about, very quickly, try and get through this as quick as I can. Gas isn't cheap. Even the gas supply isn't assured. We get a particularly cold week this winter. Something goes wrong down in the Bass Strait. We might hear gas supply being in the news as a concern. My option is not to, go frack Victoria to find more gas, which would take 10 years to bring online anyway. Whereas what we can do tomorrow is to get people to be using the air conditioners they already own for heating. So we could put a big dent in the gas demand practically overnight. And we'll go through some of the other things about how Victorians are making this happen, but also what are some of the problems. And also just to mention that throughout the whole country, with all the gas from Western Australia, the Northern Territory, as well as the East Coast, we export, 81% of it back in 2020 with a small slice left over for domestic use. But even domestically, we don't need to use that much anymore. We got better options. This map just shows how the gas system on the East Coast is connected all the way up to the coal seam gas fields in Queensland and to those massive gas export facilities. But, I used to work with SMBHP in the Bass Strait, and we told folks it was only going to last 55 years. So we're on the tail end of the Bass Strait now, and more of the gas in Victoria, if you keep using it, is going to be coming down those pipelines from Queensland. So coal seam gas already comes to Victoria, and that's going to be a bigger part of what's going on. And then there are, of course, the groups that want to bring liquefied gas into the port of Geelong and stick it into the system. That could come from Russia, who knows? So none of that gas is going to be cheap. The days of the cheap Bass Strait gas, where it was a cheap byproduct in the way of oil production, we were happy to, practically give the gas away because it was oil that was really making all the money. Those days are gone, and gas is just going to keep getting more expensive and more environmentally and socially damaging with all the things that go up in the coal seam gas fields. This probably the most complicated chart I'll share tonight. Up on the top, it shows the way that gas has been supplied in the past, in the good old days. It says 2018. The red is, the jagged line across there over the course of a year, that's the gas demand for the eastern states. And it shows that there's a big hump or a peak in the middle of the year, and of course that's winter heating. So that's basically Victorian homes, Canberra homes using gas for heating is the wintertime peak. But in 2018, no problem. There was a lot of that red, which was the Bass Strait and some of the other conventional gas fields would supply that. A little bit of yellow, which was topping up with coal seam gas, and the orange is gas coming out of the Otway storage facility. But now let's go ahead to 2025. And what we see there is that there's not much of the red anymore, the Bass Strait. That's not able to produce in the middle of winter like it used to. Yes, we can bring as much coal seam gas down those pipelines as possible. That's the yellow. But even still across the middle of the winter there, it's not at all sure exactly how we would get that much gas into Victoria. My solution, of course, is, like I said, heat with your air conditioner, and we can really crash that demand profile. Gas, is it clean? Not really. This shows some gas developments in the middle of the wine-producing region in South Australia. And this shows the coal seam gas wells up in Queensland. Maybe you've seen this before. I mean, they're on track to do 40,000 wells, mostly for export, but some of it for Victoria. There's a map there with 150 wells. So measure that, multiply that 300 times. You're going to be over to the high street, I think, before you would be able to stuff that many wells in there on that sort of scale. So that's what the coal seam gas looks like up in Queensland. People live among those wells, or at least they used to. A lot of them been bought out because of the issues with having to live in the middle of an industrial gas field like that. So if you thought that gas was clean and green, well, it's not really that much. Another image of the coal seam gas fields. And once the gas gets to town, then what happens to it? Well, a lot of it leaks. This is infrared imaging showing the streets of Boston, where they did a survey and they just found gas leaks pretty much everywhere. If you go down the street and smell it, I mean, that's what's going on. And even by design, our gas meters leak a little bit. And the tankless, so-called instantaneous gas hot water systems, every time you turn them on, every time you turn the tap, there's a little bit of a whiff of unburned methane that's released. So methane, very powerful greenhouse gas. We don't do a good job of keeping a lid on it. You might say that's Boston, that couldn't happen here, but a guy did go and do some surveys for Melbourne and Sydney and of course found the same thing. So that information is available. We're starting to track the methane emissions from the satellites, and it shows how bad the problem is globally. So that's kind of the bad news, but the good news is that we don't have to use the gas anymore. This is a reverse cycle air conditioner. It's a heat pump. Certainly in Europe, they're getting onto heat pumps as quickly as they can so they can try and get off Russian gas. But these reverse cycle air conditioners, what do? Well, they have refrigerant in them, which goes outside, collects free heat from outside, even if it's cold outside, even if it's 4 degrees outside, -4, -10. These things are probably would still work if it was 20 below outside. They'd still be able to get heat out of the air outside, pump it up to the temperature hot enough to heat this room or to heat your house. So 1 unit of electricity into one of these to run the fans and compressors, you can get 4 or 5 units of heat coming out of it. Where did all that free heat come from? It came from outside your house. So this is why the economics are so fabulous, and the gas industry can't compete with something that's like 500% efficient. So get onto this. And lots of homes, I've been in lots of homes. Well, here's a war story. Went into a home, young couple. I'm looking at the reverse cycle air conditioner in their house. And I said, but I also saw the ducted gas heating vents. So I said, how do you heat your house? And they say, oh, well, we heat it with the ducted gas heating. But it did break down last winter, but we were lucky. We were able to run the reverse cycle air conditioner for 2 weeks while we spent $5,000 to fix the gas heater. Whereas this thing is, this is a third the cost. So you can heat your house for a third the cost with the air conditioners instead of the gas heating. So that's a sad story that you hear. But I always say to folks, well, that money's in the past, so I don't really care. Let's talk about what we can do in the future. But the key thing is you have to find the heat button. So hopefully your air conditioners are reverse cycle. Some aren't, and so that's not going to be much good for heating, but a lot of them are reverse cycle these days. But a lot of people have never found the heat button. And the gas industry likes to talk about, oh, it's really expensive for people to electrify. But in some case, go find 2 AA batteries, put them in the remote control, find the heat button, turn it on, and you can start saving immediately. That's not a huge expense. And then you can get this thing going where it's even better. Now, often in our house, we've got a good northern exposure, so we probably don't turn the heater on much when the sun's out. But if you don't have that northern exposure, but you've got the solar panels, some of your electricity can be running the air conditioner that's extracting free renewable heat from the air. And you can just see what a winner this is. And then you can do the same thing with hot water. So this is a hot water heat pump, same technology, reverse cycle technology that gets heat out of the air and puts it in your water for like a third the cost of gas or a tenth the cost of gas if you can set this thing up to run on a timer with your solar panels. And if you were to buy one of these, there's a lot of rebates on offer, which I could go through in detail, more being announced every day, where you can practically get one of these things maybe for $1,000 these days. Not this particular brand, but some of the cheaper brands. And then that leaves the cooking. This shows my wife on our Induction cooktop doing a stir fry in a wok. So you can do stir fries in a wok on Induction. Do I cook? Rarely, but I did make some soup on the Induction the other day, and I'm not a very good cook. I was doing a bean soup with some kale, and I threw the kale at it, and the kale didn't all hit the pot. Some went down the edge. And on a gas burner, that's a bit of a drama, because now you put kale all through the gas burner, and you have to shut it off and pick it off. But here with Induction, since the Induction, all it's doing is heating the pot. It's not even heating the cooking surface. And so if you spill something, you just pick it up and stick it back in the pot. So I think I'm probably a bit of a safer cook now that I've got the Induction. So we added up the numbers a long time ago at Melbourne Uni, but you know, Victorians could save $2 to $3 billion a year just by finding the heat button on the air conditioner. And those numbers were based on the air conditioners we thought that were already in homes but weren't being used for heating. So it's like the biggest consumer savings ever. And you are starting to hear more of it now with these electrify actions that are going on. So that's good. Finally, the message is getting out there. Health and safety, we'll talk about that a bit more later. About the health issues with the cooking in particular. So getting rid of the gas meter is a thing. So once you're done using the gas, ring up and say, you know, get your property off my property, get this stinking, polluting, ugly thing off, and get rid of it and see what happens. There's a lot of interesting stories about what happens at that point. But it's definitely a movement. You know, thousands, tens of thousands of people have already done this. But then don't forget the rest of the house, the thermal envelope. So the insulation, the window coverings, the draft proofing, those are all very important. And some people will say, look, I tried the air conditioner for heating and it just wasn't as powerful as the gas. And that can be true. And so if there's attention to the window coverings, the insulation, the draft proofing, in that situation you can find you can be a lot happier with using the air conditioner for heating. And don't forget moisture and ventilation. As you draft proof, you have to make sure that you're getting enough fresh air in and that you understand where the moisture is going. The other night at a community group, I said, don't hang laundry around the house to dry with the windows closed. And there was like an audible gasp from the crowd. So I went and wrote an article and just published it on the Fifth Estate about why you shouldn't hang laundry around the house to dry. We can talk about that more later in the Q&A. Just one more graph probably. This is our house, an old weatherboard in Sandringham. And I make sure I only do one thing a year. I mean, you guys can do this a lot faster. You can electrify, you know, in a year maybe. But it took me lots of years. And what it shows is, this is plotted energy units, but it could almost be dollars. But the red is the gas we used to buy, and the blue is the electricity we used to buy. And the first thing we did is, here we got those first 6 solar panels, you know, back in the John Howard days. And then we did some draft proofing and some better window treatments, and we got our gas use down. But where you see the gas use drop off in 2017, that's when we started heating the place with the air conditioners instead of using the ducted gas heating. And then we got off the gas hot water. And then we put 22 more solar panels up. And then we finally got off the gas cooking. And so now you can see that this house, instead of buying all this energy, is now a net exporter of energy. So this is your, you know, net energy positive, net climate positive sort of situation. And from a dollar's point of view, now we still have an electricity bill. And for us, it's about $600. We operate an electrically heated spa, a luxury item, which is a big chunk of our electricity use. But even still, we're net exporting electricity, but our bill's about $600 a year. Over here, if we'd never made any of these changes and it was current prices, it'd be about $3,600 a year. So after all these investments, we're saving $3,000 a year. No electric car. I mean, Saul Griffith would keep going and talking about the electric car, etc. But I guess I'll do that next year. And the Victorian Roadmap. So the Victorian government did publish a roadmap last winter about getting off gas, but it wasn't really a roadmap so much as it was more like a poster in a travel agency window. It said we ought to go somewhere sometime, but it didn't really say how we would get there. More detail does come out, you know, with the budget and hopefully more in the future, and plus with community pressure. Barriers. Look, I think I might wrap up, but there are barriers, and we'll probably talk about some tonight. Every question you have is a kind of a illustration of a bit of a barrier that people have to making this switch. So let's talk about those things in Q&A. Certainly getting hold of good information is important. And I wonder if I'm done. Rebates, a lot of rebates. Again, we can talk about those, but there is one website has been set up, www.energy.gov.au/rebates, and that's kind of meant to be a central repository across all the states and jurisdictions as to where you might find the various rebates available. You can type in, you're from Victoria and you're looking for what's available on heating and cooling, etc. And this is all the community groups that are involved with this sort of thing these days, and Saul and his big switch. There we go, that's the end. All right, happy to hear questions later.
Okay, thanks very much, Tim. Tim. Always really interesting stuff, and I think a lot of people in this room are probably on this journey. I'm sort of curious, how many people have disconnected from gas here? Yeah, so there's a fair number. It's coming. So now I'm going to introduce to you Dr. Genevieve Cowie. Dr. Cowie is convener of the Research, Education and Advocacy Committee for Doctors for the Environment Australia. She is a public health physician and has worked in state government in environmental health, communicable diseases, and various aspects of public health policy. She has a range of qualifications, including a doctorate, in public health medicine and general practice. Currently, Genevieve devotes her time to helping the community, health professionals, and public policymakers understand the urgency of action on climate change in protecting all of our health. Please welcome Genevieve.
All right, well, thank you very much. It's lovely to be here. And yes, as Tim says, this is a very impressive community group. I think well done to all of you. I'd also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land, and I think in this kind of forum it's particularly worthwhile thinking about how they managed to live here for 65,000 years without trashing the joint, which we are actually doing at the moment. Okay, so my brief is to talk about health and gas in the home, so that is what I shall do. The upshot of it all is basically that the risks from burning carbon inside our houses are increasingly recognised, and that we now have much safer, healthier and more energy efficient ways of heating our homes and cooking, obviously. Okay, there's a wider issue here though, and that is with indoor air quality, some of which Tim's alluded to. There is a tension here because we do need to tightly seal our homes for energy efficiency, but that comes at the detriment often of indoor air quality unless we take active measures to manage it. The safety of gas cooking and heating is not in fact compatible with a tightly sealed modern house. There are various health concerns. There's the products of combustion that come with gas. There's therefore also airborne disease, which has been obviously a particularly big issue with COVID, but that includes flu and various other airborne diseases. There's also off-gassing of volatile organic compounds, and they come from gas, but also from things like paint and furniture in our houses as well. It's sort of part of the modern life. Obviously, it is much more effective to prevent illness than it is to try and deal with the consequences, and often we don't even realise that the illnesses that we have are consequences of our poor indoor air quality. And also the technology to improve indoor air quality is likely to be used more and more. There'll be a lot more interest in it. Obviously air purifiers are one part of that, but mechanical ventilation exchange I think will become a bigger issue. It can't manage everything, but I think it's got an important role to play, and I think we'll learn more about that. The ways that we have of exhausting our indoor air to the outside are often ineffective. We think they're doing more than they actually are, so that's an important thing to keep in mind for indoor air quality in general. So with gas in our homes, remember it's known as natural gas. That is gas industry spin, okay? It's methane, and the mains gas is methane. LPG is a mixture of propane and butane. The burning of these produces a complex mix of compounds. So there's carbon dioxide, of course. There's nitrous oxide and nitrogen dioxide, which together are known as NOx. Those are both indoor and outdoor pollutants. There's carbon monoxide, which is getting to really dangerous territory there. There's formaldehyde, which is one of the volatile organic compounds. And fine particulate matter, and you're probably more familiar with fine particulate matter from bushfire smoke and general air quality issue, outdoor air quality issues. So burning gas gives you the products of combustion inside your house. So these can all of these products of combustion can easily reach harmful levels inside your home. And of course there's the ever-present risk of fire as well. And the risks to health and safety are being increasingly recognised, but they are unevenly distributed in our community. So those that are most at risk, like those children in particular, but also those in lower socioeconomic groups, they are much more at risk from the risks, basically. Okay, so let's talk about exhausts. Okay, so those are flues and range hoods and exhaust fans, the things that should be taking the products of combustion outside your home. They may not be present at all, and I sincerely hope that nobody here is using an unflued gas fireplace of any sort. Okay, they're extremely dangerous. Range hoods over our cooktops, they're often not used because they're noisy, and they also may not actually be exhausting to the outside. What they may do is actually just take the air above your cooktop, remove some of the particulate matter from it, and then blow it straight back in to your house. So look to see what kind of range hood you have. Flues can become blocked, of course, and they can also be made ineffective by exhaust fans, whether it's range hoods or the bathroom exhaust fan elsewhere in your house, and this is called negative air pressure, and I will show you on the next slide what that's all about. That's a feature of our modern houses. Stoves may actually still leak gas even when they're off. Obviously not ideal. And also exhausts, they don't actually eliminate the risk that comes from gas even if they're correctly functioning and correctly used. So that's a problem. Okay, so this picture is from the Energy Safe Victoria website, because it is a little bit difficult to understand what negative pressure is and how it comes about in your house. So this, I would also hasten to add, this picture does not show unflued gas heaters, okay? Just imagine unflued just means that all the products of combustion are going straight into your house, okay? So these are the two better options. An open flued heater, though, is one that takes the heat that is needed for the fire to actually burn, and that takes that air from inside the room. The problem with that is that if that room is tightly sealed, there's nowhere for there to be the proper airflow to go in the correct direction. So what can easily happen, and particularly if you've put a range hood on or an exhaust fan elsewhere in the house, rather than going up the chimney, the exhaust gases can come through the draft diverter straight back into the room. And you go and breathe them in. And this can in fact be fatal, which is really worth thinking about. Now, a room-sealed heater, and I'd also say this can also be either gas or wood heating too, okay? You're still burning carbon, whichever way you're doing it, you're burning carbon. A room-sealed heater is much safer, where the air for the fire is taken from outside the house and not inside the room. So they are not going to be affected by negative pressure inside the house. So that should keep functioning correctly. But whatever type you have needs regular maintenance by a licensed gas fitter and proper operation. These are central to reducing the harm, but it cannot eliminate the risk, because things can go wrong in between servicing. Okay, so looking more specifically at specific pollutants, nitrogen dioxide is the best studied of the indoor pollutants. It's a potent respiratory irritant. It directly causes airway constriction and sensitisation to allergens like dust mite or pollen, whatever. So for asthma, this is its clearest association. For gas cooking, there are similar levels of risk on childhood asthma as having a smoker in the house. So that is quite startling. It's involved both in the development and the exacerbation of asthma. So a child with current asthma in a house with a gas stove, 30% of the risk of them having asthma is from that stove. For the community, the wider community, so that will include those people with and without gas, so the whole community, 13% of community risk of childhood asthma is from gas stoves. So PM 2.5, fine particulate matter, so that's what you'll be more familiar with from bushfire smoke, for instance, or poor outdoor air quality days. That also irritates the airways, it aggravates asthma, it is involved in the development and exacerbation of chronic lung disease in adults. It's also involved with heart disease, worsening heart disease, and premature death in people with heart or lung disease. It also has systemic effects. Because the particles are so fine, they get breathed right into the deep parts of your lung and into the rest of your body. And so they're going to have systemic effects on the rest of your body. So we're talking here about things like diabetes, dementia and poor pregnancy outcomes. Those things are less clear than the other parts of the equation, but they're there. Now, formaldehyde is one of those volatile organic compounds. It's highly toxic and easily inhaled. It's present in small amounts in the products of combustion. And is also very irritating to the eyes and skin and is well known for causing cancer. It's a known carcinogen. So these are all the things that come out of gas and burning it in your house. Now this is probably the most immediately dangerous, carbon monoxide. It's odourless and colourless, so you will not know it is there. It particularly comes about when there's partial combustion, so there's not enough oxygen getting through to the flame. It comes from any way of burning carbon, can give you carbon monoxide, so whether it's gas, wood, kerosene, diesel, petrol, they all do it. The symptoms are very non-specific, and this makes it very hard to recognise. So you can easily think that you've got gastro or flu or something like that. So headache, nausea, vomiting, muscle pain, weakness, shortness of breath, and then you start to get to more serious things like dizziness and confusion, chest pain and coma and death. As I said, it's often not suspected. The things to look out for in particular are if you're feeling sick, only when you're at home. Or if people and pets in the one house are all sick at the same time, there's something going on. And it is very likely to be a lot more common than the actual documented cases, and that's related to the difficulty of being precise with the diagnosis of carbon monoxide. As I said, it's often not suspected, but to actually prove it, as soon as you get out of the house, your levels of carbon monoxide go down in your blood, as soon as you're out of the atmosphere that's actually got it in. So it can be hard to prove. Okay, so any gas appliance can become faulty, and quite frighteningly, even central heating can spill carbon monoxide if it's not functioning correctly. New open flued gas heaters, so they're the ones that have the problem with negative pressure. There's a new standard now which came into effect in August of last year. So those ones, the new standard says that the open fluid gas heater must switch off if it spills carbon monoxide for more than 15 minutes. Okay, this is a great improvement, but I have to say 15 minutes is still quite a long time to be spilling carbon monoxide. There's the issue with negative air pressure and how we know that draft proofing our houses is important, but it's a problem if you're burning carbon inside your house. It's really important for you to service your gas appliances at a minimum of every 2 years by a licensed gas fitter with a Type A licence and a carbon monoxide meter, which they're all supposed to have. It's also worth bearing in mind that those who can't afford it are more likely to have older, more dangerous types of heater, and they're less likely to have those heaters serviced. So, emergency actions, should you suspect carbon monoxide poisoning in your house from whatever cause, is to open the doors and windows, switch off the appliance, evacuate the house, then seek medical assistance. And as to how urgent that is will depend on how sick people are, because they should get better very quickly when you move out into the fresh air. And of prime importance, do not use that appliance again until it's serviced or replaced. Okay, this is very dangerous territory. So if you successfully manage to get the products of combustion outside your house, then what happens? Well, of course, it reduces the outdoor air quality for you and your neighbours. And it's particularly worsened by weather conditions like temperature inversions, which means that all those gases are going to stay around near ground level. And in some areas, it's particularly important. I mean, we all know, we've seen, smog with temperature inversions here in Melbourne. There are some places that get a lot of temperature inversions where they have major problems with smoke and, products of combustion outside people's houses, particularly the Tamar Valley in Tasmania is well known for it, and they also have a lot of wood-fired heaters, which just adds to all the particulate matter as well. And then, of course, there's the bigger issues. Of course, all of these gases, they're potent greenhouse gases. A lot of people think about climate change being an environmental issue, which it is, but we rely on that environment. Our health depends on having a healthy environment. And here are some of the problems for our health from those greenhouse gases coming out of our gas heating. So we're getting to real basics here. Food and water safety and security, we rely on these things. The actual air quality, of course, for respiratory and systemic illnesses. Infectious diseases, certain types of infectious diseases are increasing with global warming, and particularly mosquito-borne illness and gastroenteritis. So that gastroenteritis is a result of of food and water safety issues, basically. There is, of course, heat-related illness itself, exacerbations of pre-existing illness, particularly around the heart and lungs, mental ill health, and of course I'm not just talking about the deep sadness that we all feel at the way we're trashing the planet, but also at all of the things that, loss of livelihoods, lives, loved ones, the sense of place, displacement, all the things that come from as a result of climate change and particularly extreme weather events. Of course, there are biodiversity impacts, and these affect our quality of life, but they also affect everything else, the food, air, water, mental health, all of them. Of course, extreme weather events and so on often impact vital infrastructure, and remember that includes vital health infrastructure as well, which puts further pressure on areas that are already suffering from the effects of climate change. And of course, there are many, many more. So, what to do? The interim safety measures until you can move on to safer and more efficient electric heating and cooking from preferably using renewable sources of energy. Improve the ventilation in your house. Use a range hood ducted to the outside. Open the kitchen window when you're cooking with gas. Air the house when the weather's conducive. And don't run the exhaust fans at the same time as an open flued gas or wood heater. Use a plug-in electric stove. They're not that expensive. You could get one for about $100. An induction cooktop. Check the Energy Safe Victoria website for safety alerts. If you are having to use a gas heater, check their website for safety alerts to make sure yours is not on the particularly dangerous list. Get your gas heating serviced every 2 years by a licensed Type A gas fitter with a carbon monoxide meter who actually tests for carbon monoxide spillage. Look for changes in operation of your gas appliance, particularly for changes in the colour or popping sounds coming from the flame itself. Sleep safely. Don't leave your gas heating on at night time or for extended periods of time. That increases the risk that you will never wake up. One of the houses I previously rented had a heater doing this, I have to say, and we thankfully never did leave it on at night. Consider a carbon monoxide alarm. There is no Australian standard for a carbon monoxide alarm, so if you are considering using one, make sure that they comply with the US or the European Union standard, but make sure it's installed correctly, and remember that it's only a backup measure. It can never entirely eliminate the risk. And never ever bring outdoor gas appliances indoors. Okay, you're running a terrible risk. And that's it. I believe we're up to questions.
I have to say, when Sally first brought to us the issues of childhood asthma and gas and the other impacts of having a gas stove in your home, we were like, you know, she's probably looking at really out there research that isn't backed up by anything. And then the more we read about it and the more we learned about it, the more mainstream we understood this to be, and we now have Doctors for the Environment making it a topic that they are speaking about. If you go to the Asthma Australia website, you will see very clearly the allocation of attributing gas to something like 12% of childhood asthma. So it's a real concern. And I think the other concern that you raise is it's about this just transition, because those of us excuse me, who can afford to get off gas at home and have a new heaters rather than old ones that are leaking are going to benefit most. And eventually there are going to be people left on the gas network who've got old appliances that are leaky, and it's going to be expensive. And we need to do something in our policy to make sure that doesn't happen.
Just wonder how economically viable and difficult it is to sub in a heat pump for our combustion gas fed boiler.
Yes. So there are some specialists these days that you could get hold of. I tell my clients, Chris Siddons at Siddons Hydrosol, you could talk to him. Stiebel Eltron has a wonderful showroom in Port Melbourne, so you could go in and talk to Stiebel. And Renew magazine, published by the not-for-profit organization Renew, you find a lot of mention of hydronic systems, heat pump hydronic systems in there. So those are some sources. And of course, My Efficient Electric Home, we'd be talking about it there. So those could be some options for you so that you don't have to keep burning the gas for the hydronic. That said, my son did just buy a new house for him. And we went in there and it had gas hydronic and it had 3 reverse cycle air conditioners. So the hydronic's gone. And so they'll be heating and cooling with the reverse cycle air conditioners. Not a big house, and my daughter-in-law was happy to get the wall space back with the hydronic being gone. So they never used the hydronic. I know it's a lovely heat and all that, but you can't cool your house in summer with hydronic heating, so that's one of the advantages of the reverse cycle. And I guess I encourage people that you don't really have to have hydronic in the Melbourne climate. If your house has a good thermal envelope, that's the insulation, the draft proofing, all that, then you should be able to get by quite comfortably with a reverse cycle air conditioner just ticking over. But I know folks that, built, well, in fact, there's one great example. It's documented in Renew magazine by a fellow who probably doesn't live too far from here, Cameron Monroe. He built a nice bit at the back of his old house, good thermal envelope. He put hydronic underfloor heating with a heat pump, so he spent a lot of money on that. But he also put an air conditioner in there, and what he found out was that he never had to use the hydronic. He was able to just keep the air conditioner ticking over to be comfortable in a place with a good thermal envelope. And he wrote an article in Renew magazine about how he blew $40,000. But he was happy to mention that to people, so maybe that they can take a different course. So yeah, if I was to visit your house, we'd look at it, we'd look at the thermal envelope, how can those things be improved? Do you already have air conditioners, or how do you cool the place in summer? And so what you might find is you possibly could be happy without the hydronic. But talk to those other people about what's possible. It'll be big dollars, so you could be looking at $20,000 or something to change to a heat pump. And it used to be the heat pumps didn't actually put out water that was really hot enough to make your whole system work as well as what it used to under the powerful gas. But there are hotter heat pumps coming out of Europe these days that can give you a water temperature closer to what the gas used to do.
Thanks. Really comprehensive. Thank you. I think my question's related. We have a very an old house which has got very tall ceilings. It's an old church school, and my husband insisted we went out of ducted heating and gas. We put in 2 split systems. We couldn't afford at the time to put a third one in, but the rest of the house is freezing cold, and also because of the very high ceilings and some inserted windows to give light internally, the hot air all goes up. So I just wondered if you've got some suggestions to how to heat, not with gas, our house.
Yeah, so if folks are thinking, yeah, this is a good idea to look at the reverse cycle air conditioners, we'll have a look at that. What I suggest is, and I know one particular brand, Dakin, get the hard copy brochure of everything they sell. And one thing that a lot of people in Victoria haven't seen are the reverse cycle air conditioners that aren't up on the wall, they're down on the floor. Apparently, if you go to Tasmania, New Zealand, this is more of the sort of floor-mounted reverse cycle air conditioner that you see there. Because those people are smart enough to realize, what am I buying here? I'm buying a heater that I can also use occasionally in the summertime as an air conditioner or as a cooler. But it really is nicer if the heat is coming from low, particularly if you have the very high ceilings. And for some folks, consider the possibility of using a so-called floor-standing reverse cycle air conditioner as a way to heat the place. Almost looks like one hydronic panel, I guess you could say, because it's down near the floor level. But otherwise, if all your heat is getting lost up there, yes, some people do use some ceiling fans to try to push it back down again. Sometimes you can find ceiling fans make you feel colder because they are blowing, they are moving more air around. And if you have single glazed windows that are cold and maybe not great window treatments, then just moving air around the place can actually, shoot you in the foot because it actually makes it feel a bit colder. I don't know, from what I heard of your question, I hope that answers it, but maybe we can talk a bit more later in specifics.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I'm happy. I don't have anywhere else to go tonight, so we can chat about that.
Thank you. Tim, my question regarding refrigerant in heat pumps and air conditioning. So heat pump, for example, I would like to ask you why is that everyone, and you too, just to make sure that, how would you do it so that people pay attention to the refrigerant of the heat pump that they buy, please?
Yes.
So there are 3 types: carbon dioxide, propane, and the terrible one. Okay, carbon dioxide number 1, and propane is number 3, which is second one. So it's the third one I'm worried about. So my question is, what could we and you make people to pay attention to the refrigerant type heat pump that people buy? Thank you.
Yes, very good question. So in your refrigerator, in the air conditioner in your car, in these reverse cycle air conditioners, in a hot water heat pump, there's a refrigerant. And folks will remember back to the older days, and there's still some of that stuff around, like R22, which was a refrigerant that would help to destroy the ozone layer. So they took those off the market. Those aren't available anymore, and they came out with other classes of refrigerants. Now, unfortunately, these various refrigerants, some of them, okay, they aren't going to be destroying the ozone layer anymore, but they do have they can have a global warming potential that can be quite significant. I mean, some of them might be, on a kilogram per kilogram basis, 1,300 times more damaging for a global warming potential than carbon dioxide. But there are some better refrigerants. So you mentioned carbon dioxide itself is a refrigerant, and so yeah, it's got a global warming potential, but it might be 1/1300th as much as R32 or R134A or some of the other refrigerants. Propane you mentioned as well is a refrigerant that doesn't have any global warming potential at all, but it is propane, it is flammable. So the regulators have looked at these in more recent times. It used to be they didn't want any refrigerant that could be flammable. But now when you weigh up the different hazards and risks, the global warming potential versus flammability, you find now that most of your refrigerators, the refrigerant is isobutane, which is flammable, but doesn't have any global warming potential, and there's really not that much refrigerant in a refrigerator anymore because they're so efficient. So sure, when you're buying this different equipment, you know, you'll look at the cost of it, you'll look at the star ratings, you'll look at the noise, but also look at the refrigerant that's in there, and consider that also in your choice as to whether you can get a refrigerant with the lower global warming potential.
A few years ago, we went all electric, but we still have our gas meter. How do we get rid of it?
Yeah, a lot of stories there. So how do you get rid of it? So it's still there. Look, I would ring up either your present electricity retailer or your former gas retailer and start the discussion, and they may or may not want to talk to you, or try to talk directly with your gas distributor in this area. I don't know if it's Multinet Gas or if it's another, but your gas distributor. A couple different stories. Saul Griffith up in New South Wales. So he wanted to get rid of his gas meter. The story is that they charged him $1,500 to get rid of it. And we see stories in Canberra that it costs $1,000 to get rid of a gas meter. And over in the western part of Victoria, in the AusNet distribution area, $500 to get rid of a gas meter. When we finally got off gas, I rang up my gas retailer, and they said, well, Multinet Gas will want to get rid of the gas meter. And I said, what will that cost? And I heard all these other stories, and they said it'll cost $69. And so probably too gleefully, I grabbed onto that and said, great, get rid of the gas meter and I'll pay the $69. And that's what happened. My son, he didn't pay anything. At one point, he got off gas before me, and I noticed the gas meter was still there. And I said, get rid of the gas meter. And he said, Dad, I got other things to do with my life. But a year later, he got a bill from AGL to the householder, and they said, you got to pay these gas connection charges, like $1 a day, so here's a bill for $60, and if you don't pay this, we're going to disconnect your gas. And he didn't like getting these letters, so he rang them up, and the meter quietly disappeared one day for $0. So what I'd suggest to folks who are getting off gas, now you're already off gas, there's kind of a legacy thing to think about there, but for others who get there, ring up and don't volunteer to pay anything. I think the right answer is $0. I mean, you could say, look, I want you, say to the gas distributor, come get your property off of my property. I don't want this ugly, stinking, polluting thing here anymore. Get rid of it. And I think they'll probably quietly come and take it away. Another story from up in Greensboro. I saw this on Facebook, a guy that I know, Alan. He's been off gas for 10 years. And they showed up the other day to install a new gas meter because the old one was out of date. But Alan was the type of guy, he just grabbed them and he just talked until they left with 2 gas meters in their boot, not just one. So there you go. You might find they front up like they did for Alan, and they want to replace the gas meter. If you're there on the day, hopefully you can get them to take it away for $0. But honestly, there are discussions going on at the regulator and in the government authorities. Like I did a home energy consult with the state energy minister, Lily D'Ambrosio, so she's getting her home off gas. But there needs to be a discussion amongst the regulators about what is the equitable way to decommission the gas grid. One thought by Alan Pears, a noted person in this space, is that the cost should just be smeared over all gas and electricity users. But if we all gleefully leave for $0, and we got lucky, we acted early, eventually, you hollow out the middle, and you'll have the rich and famous, they're still on gas, they don't care, but you also have the poor will still be on gas, and they'll be carrying the cost of the network and the cost of the final decommissioning. So they need to come up with a better, more equitable scheme than that. But if I were any of you, I would not put up your hand to pay any money at all to get rid of the gas meter at this time.
G'day. My question's for Tim as well. Do I need to connect to three-phase power to go to an all-electric home, just in consideration of multiple air conditioning units, the heat pump, the induction cooker, and potentially powering my EV maybe in the future?
Generally not. And like the Facebook group, if you're on Facebook, it's a searchable database. And in fact, I think it's the world's largest database on this topic. And you can type in there three-phase, and you'll see a million different discussions that we've had on Facebook about the three-phase, but you generally don't need it. I mean, our house is all electric, it's single-phase. Three-phase could be good in a few situations. For example, maybe here you're limited to only exporting 5 kilowatts from your solar PV system, but that's per phase. So if you had three-phase, you could export 15 kilowatts. And the other thing is, yes, if you had three-phase, you could charge your car faster than what you're going to be able to do on single-phase. But you don't need three-phase for an induction cooktop. You don't need three-phase, for as many split systems as you're going to need. There are some ducted air conditioning systems that do run more efficiently on three-phase, so that could be a reason for three-phase. And the last one I can think of is if you're into arc welding, then you might need the three-phase. But generally, it's not something that you need. What three-phase means? It just means you have 3 supply lines coming in. Out on the street, there's 3 wires going by. And for most houses, just one of them comes off into your house. That's called single-phase. But if you had all 3 of them coming in, you would have triple the supply, and that's what they call three-phase.
Hi, my question is for Genevieve. Look, I'm thinking about running a campaign next year, which is basically make sure your next appliance is not gas. And a particular focus is gas stoves in the home. I'm wondering whether, in your view, the health impacts of having gas in the home are sufficient for government to be out there saying, we are going to ban the sale of gas stoves going forward.
Yes, the short answer is yes. I think the information is, and given that we have alternatives. So, the gas was all fine when we didn't have better alternatives. But, you know what governments are like? They don't like to lead the way too much. So essentially the problem will be that so many people still are so fond of their gas cooktops. And until the government feels that there's a community upswelling about it, it's very unlikely that they would take that option. I think the energy security angle and supply might be better, but quite frankly, both federal and state governments are still captured by the gas, the fossil fuel industry. So there'd be a lot of community work to do there first. Governments like to act when they feel safe in doing it, rather than truly leading. So, yeah. But as a community group, yeah, go for it. Really, there's no good reason to be installing gas cooktops when we have so much better alternative, safer alternative to do it.
Just one little story, if I could. I go into a house and there's 15 things to talk about with people, whether it's heating or the draft proofing, whatever. And early on, as an assessor, you try to understand what people are interested in. And like there was this one woman, and she said, "Oh yeah, gas cooking. I love the gas cooking. We're not going to be talking about gas cooking. I'm keeping the gas cooking." And so I steered away from that subject for a while, but finally came back to the end, and I said, "Yeah, gas cooking. It's been linked to 12% of childhood asthma." And she looked at me. And she said, "Oh, my daughter's got asthma." And so her whole thinking just changed then. So then she's like, "Oh, okay, let's talk about the induction cooktop."
Yeah, I think that also speaks to what an excellent job the gas industry has done. The gas was so much, more responsive and everything than the previous, electric type cooktops and, cooking over coal and wood and everything. Yes, fabulous. But we can now do all the things that people like about gas cooking with induction cooktops. Even the wok issue can be managed, and really it's a matter of moving public opinion, really, and undoing all the excellent work of the gas industry over such a long period of time, really.
My question's for Tim. We have ducted heating and ducted cooling systems in our house, and it seems to me that the squillions of other houses with a similar situation, why not retain the ducted heating system and replace the gas heater with an electric? And would you know of any moves to have that done? And I recently heard, a few months ago, the CEO of Sealy, the biggest manufacturer of ducted heating systems, was predicting that gas would be around for a lot longer, and there was no reason why he should change to any other system in the meantime. So as an additional idea, is it possible to force the manufacturers of gas appliances to also make a retrofitted electric heater?
Yeah, so if you've got, say, ducted gas heating under the floor, you can inquire of air conditioner installers about, it's similar to the question about the hydronic, take the boiler off the hydronic and put a heat pump. You can take the gas furnace off the gas ducts and you could put a heat pump out there that would give you heating and cooling, so reverse cycle. But you'd probably find they want to replace the ducts because ducts just for gas heating, they're probably going to be smaller than what you'd want to use for cooling. And so reusing the ducts is not often something that you find people succeed in doing. It's usually a duct replacement as well as a replacement of the furnace itself with a heat pump. But it's certainly something to look at as another option. If, by the way, on YouTube, the not-for-profit organization Renew has a YouTube channel, and there's an hour of me just talking about heating and cooling options, plus, the audience Q&A afterwards, and we go through all these options. I mean, for an existing house, yeah, you've got a certain situation, which is probably not optimum. I mean, a lot of people have the ducted gas heating and the evaporative cooling, and uncharitably I call that the devil's combination, that you have those two things, but there are people, ripping all that out and instead just going with, 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 split systems around the house. So that can be another way that gets you away from the ducts altogether. But there's all these different combinations, and you can section off parts of the house. You could say, right, the main living area, we could put a split system there, but I'd like to keep the ducted for other bits. Now, there are some issues with ducted heating, or so-called central heating, and I was in a client earlier today in Surrey Hills. You pretty much have to leave all the doors open. So when you have heat coming into one room, into a bedroom, it's got to get back to the central return in the hallway, and she didn't know this. So she had like 6 doors closed, and so the whole ducted heating system was totally not functioning because she had all the doors closed. But she wanted to close the doors. So what that means is the central heating system is not the solution that she was looking for. And another thing about your ducted heating, all these things have filters in them. All these things that blow air around have filters in them. So clean the filter in your air conditioner. It can be DIY. Just grab both edges of the plastic panel on the front and pull it up and clean the filter. But on your ducted gas heating, it should also have a filter, but most of them don't. So you can remove the return grill. There should be a filter there, but if there's not, then just reach your hand into the ducts and you'll pull out a big handful of dirt and dust because the system never had a filter. So a lot of people, they know they can save money by heating with the air conditioner, and when I show them all the filth in their ducts, then that's enough for them to say, right, they're never going to use the gas heating again. Why are there no filters? Because the whole system was not designed properly, it was undersized, and so somebody's solution to getting more heat out of the system was to remove the filter. So that's like you're driving down the Hume Highway, your car's not going fast enough, so you take the air filter out and throw it away. We'd never do that with a car, but we're happy to do that with the air we breathe.
Hi. When I started reading all the stuff, one of the things that really struck me personally about gas in the house was the neurological impacts. Could you talk about that?
Right, neurological impacts of gas in the house. Okay, that's a little bit more challenging. Well, for carbon monoxide, it's fairly easy. It's extremely bad for your brain and cause permanent brain damage if you're not rescued from the house. The neurological, particularly if you're talking about things like dementia, for instance, that is not as well studied, but it's definitely an association that's there. So I can't give you a lot more in the way of detail about that one, but anything that impacts the air quality in your house is not good for not only your heart and lungs, but the rest of your body more generally, and particularly with things that you're breathing in that go all around your whole body. Fine particulate matter that gets right through into the lungs, nitrous oxide, nitrogen dioxide, all of those things. Okay, then they're not good for you. I don't know how much it helps to know more detail. Right. Yeah, okay, so poor obstetric outcomes are associated, or I think it's more than that now, with breathing in the products of combustion and poor air quality, poor indoor air quality. ADHD, couldn't say much more than that. I'd be very surprised if the research on that was really conclusive, but so I couldn't give you any more on that, but certainly poor obstetric outcomes is one of them. Anything that, obviously, particularly in early pregnancy, there are, the unborn child is so much more vulnerable. I actually have a colleague in the audience here who could probably talk to you about it later too. She might know a little bit more about that particular aspect. But breathing contaminated air is not a good thing for a growing baby or for the mother. We can do better. We don't have to wait for the proof. We can do better already. And I'd say that's also the precautionary principle in public health. You assume that, it's not good, so you act to prevent it. You don't have to wait for final proof on that. That would not be worth waiting for. Mm.
My grandmother, I recall, she had an actual flame in the kitchen. You had to see it.
Fire, yeah.
My questions to Genevieve, or maybe a bit to both. We have a very close family who's got a small child with asthma, and they live in a rental property that is serviced by gas heating and a gas cooker. In the short term, what can they do to sort of minimise his risk?
Minimising the risk. Okay, so that gets down to the things I was talking about things like ventilation, opening the window when you're cooking with the gas, trying not to have the child in the kitchen when cooking. It can be, a real challenge when you're trying to supervise children, but not having the child with their head, that they're about the same height as a gas cooktop. So, trying to keep them out of the kitchen. It's also, of course, a safety issue from the point of view of fire, too, with a child in there or spills from a hot stove. The ventilation. I'd also say a carbon monoxide meter would also be a really helpful thing in that sort of situation. Although it's only measuring carbon monoxide, that's an indicator for other products of combustion as well. I'd also make sure there are new rules in place for the servicing of gas appliances that landlords must abide by. So it might even be yearly. You have a look at the Victorian residential tenancies regulations. So you can find out all this information. So the landlord has to make sure that all those appliances are being properly serviced regularly. And that, of course, is a result of deaths due to carbon monoxide poisoning.
Another thing which apparently can contribute to asthma is the level of moisture and humidity in the home. And I mentioned the other day I published an article on the Fifth Estate, but apparently, and so I'm a chemical engineer, so about the health stuff, not so sure, but a medical piece of research that I referenced says that you should aim for no more than about 50% relative humidity in a home for the best outcomes with respect to asthma. And what you'll find right around this time of the year is probably in a lot of the rooms in our house, we've got 60% relative humidity, 70% relative humidity. For $20, you can get an RH, a relative humidity monitor. And so you could stick that in the bedroom, like in our master bedroom with my wife and myself, sleeping there, we'll wake up in the morning at 70%. I recently bought a dehumidifier, and we'll suck 2 liters of water out of the bedroom with a dehumidifier, and it comes down to 50%, which is getting toward that point, which maybe is better. But then over the course of the day and night, again, it'll go back up to 70%. So when we're in a house, we breathe out a lot of moisture. Our dogs breathe out a lot of moisture. The houseplants put out a lot of moisture. Don't hang laundry around the house. All those things can add to the moisture load. You can try to open windows to help with that, or maybe a dehumidifier, but apparently some of that stuff contributes to asthma.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are having trouble with mould at the moment after, the last couple of years of which have been so wet, and people in rental houses are particularly in a particularly difficult position. They're much more likely to have mould in their houses because of the malfunctioning house. Can be very many issues that contribute to that, and obviously there's too much moisture in the house if you've got mould going there. The mould greatly exacerbates asthma. People become sensitised to it. So everything should use every bit of the Residential Tenancies Act to try and make sure that any house that you or your loved ones are renting has their moisture management issues dealt with, particularly if there's mould.
Okay, long time on questions. I can borrow that. Okay. Look, we have run out of time for questions. I'm hoping that our speakers will hang around for a bit afterwards, if that's all right, if people can ask you further questions. I just want to say thank you very much to both of you for coming. The last part of this evening, we're going to have a bit of an introduction to the Electrify Boroondara project that has been started here. It's been going for about 3 or 4 months here in Boroondara. It's about electrifying our homes, businesses, and transport. And I'm going to start by introducing you to Mark Cubitt. Mark is the convener of the Electrify Boroondara Alliance Steering Committee. And he's going to tell us a bit about this new project. And just to give you a bit of a sense of the kind of quality of the people that we've got engaged with this project, I'm going to tell you a bit about Mark. So after a successful career in the finance world, Mark changed gears and moved into the philanthropic sector. He's been involved in a wide range of philanthropic activities at home and abroad, including working for the Planet Wheeler Foundation and heading up an organization that funds a large school in Tanzania. Mark also serves as the chair of Monash University's Investment Advisory Committee. Please welcome Mark.
Thank you, Lynn, and thank you for the very kind introduction, but you ought to see the CVs of the people who are on the Electrify Boroondara Steering Committee. There's a lot of talent, a lot of smarts going into this. I'm just going to read out what our blurb is, and Electrify Boroondara is a community-led alliance. I think we've heard reference already tonight to things happen from the bottom up. We aim to empower the community to take practical steps to save money, reduce emissions, and create a safe future for our kids. What we've heard about tonight, reducing the use of gas through transitioning to electrical appliances, educating the community about solar, batteries, energy efficiency, helping people to navigate their way through to buying electric vehicles and e-bikes. Now, that's the blurb. Let's get into what we're actually doing as well. We are apolitical. We did have a small event a couple of weeks ago where Saul Griffith spoke to a small group. We had a wide selection of Boroondara councillors there. We also had our independent federal member. We also had two Liberal members, one of them the leader of the opposition party, and we had a Labor member there as well. So we do seek to be apolitical. We do have the support of Boroondara Council, and we in turn we both want to support them, and we want to push them along to if anything achieve their targets even quicker. Why this initiative now? I remember back to the election before last, and I'm sure a lot of you do as well, where climate was the 7th most important issue on Australian voters' minds. We all know that changed at the last election, but I think there's a feeling out there in the electorate now that, okay, we've solved that problem, the government are taking care of it, and we can go back to the issues that are more important in our life. It's our kids' education, it might be our health, inflation, interest rates, power bills, those sort of facets. What's incumbent on us is to assist people who have all those pressures in their life to realise, as Saul Griffith puts it, that 42% of decarbonisation can happen by decisions being made in the home. So the sort of issues that we've talked about tonight, they're not in an individual home, that's going to have an almost infinitesimally small impact on the carbon footprint. But with all the households, 11 million households across Australia, electric vehicles, all the rest of it, 42% of the job is incumbent on happening within these households. People in this room tonight, by virtue of the fact you've come along, shows you are interested, and you are a very, very informed crowd. But it was only earlier talking to Tim just before we spoke, he goes into people's households who actively want to hear how they should do things. And Tim was telling me that the knowledge of induction cooktops is infinitesimally low, almost non-existent. So that's what we're dealing with there, and that's where I think a big part of our role is comms, communication, telling people what they can do in their household, including, I think, one of the simpler things that it was pointed out to me was we all know that our gas-fired hot water unit is going to die on us one day, and we're going to want a replacement that day or the next day. Just being prepared, knowing what to do about getting an electric unit in, so that come that day you can move in the electric direction. So there's a lot for us to do. There's a whole selection of projects as well, like the electrification of rental properties and social housing. What can we do to speed that up within Boroondara? We want to investigate bulk buying of electricity. We want to engage with the power suppliers to see what's possible and to see what the roadblocks are towards moving things along more quickly. Energy audits are on the agenda, community battery feasibility. There's just an awful lot there. So it's incumbent on this committee to find out what the impediments are to making this all happen more quickly, be they physical impediments, be they bureaucratic impediments, or be they just be the impediment of a lack of knowledge. So what can you do? Well, I'm going to guess everyone in this room is already doing an awful lot, but I know a lot of you are involved with the committees in light of footprints that are helping this initiative. Please keep up that effort. In fact, even more I'll ask of you, and or if anyone wants to join directly to our committee meetings, then please shout out. We all know we can do this. We all know it's going to happen in the long term, but we all know we want it to happen an awful lot more quickly. Thank you very much.
Ooh, okay, thanks very much, Mark. I see there's some clipboards that have been being circulated. I'm not sure which ones they are. We have two things that we're asking of people tonight. One is if they would like to join the Light of Footprints Electrify Boroondara working group that I'm about to tell you a little bit about. And the other is if you would like to receive emails from Electrify Boroondara itself. So Electrify Boroondara is getting its act together. It's putting some great material on its website. So if you sign up to their email list, you'll start getting notifications about things that the Electrify Boroondara Alliance is doing. Okay, so before Mick comes and does the final steps, just wanted to tell you a little bit about what the EB working group in Lighter Footprints has been doing. We've been putting together materials for use by the whole EB Alliance, and those are the two flyers that you have in your hand, the trifold and the tip sheet. Both of those documents are also online documents, so if you use the QR code, you can go ahead and see links to lots more information. And I think the funnest thing is in the trifold, there are links to 3 videos, and you'll see we have a few of the video stars here in the room tonight. So we've got Philippa and Julie, and I don't think Wes Galt made it tonight, but he's in there as well. So do use the QR codes, have a look at the videos, they're fun. But we're also working on developing content for inclusion in newsletters and publications like the Glenferrie Times. I think Josh is here tonight. He's been doing some great writing. We've got lots of ideas for projects we want to implement as the year progresses. So if you want to get involved, please sign up for the EB working group. We meet fortnightly on a Tuesday night on Zoom, and there's plenty to do. Now I'm going to hand over to my co-convener Mick, who's going to tell you about what's coming up next.
Thanks, Lynn. Thanks everyone for coming along. What a massive audience tonight. We weren't expecting this bigger crowd, so the issue is really resonating. And thanks for everyone for coming out on a relatively cold evening.